Some relationships don't end all at once. They fade quietly, while you're still inside them. When I met Jake, I was 29 years old and he was 32. Everything felt normal. Actually, more than normal. We met on a rainy evening in Seattle, in a small cafe. That day we just talked. He was smiling, confident, and he seemed to be listening. In moments like that, you don't think someone could slowly harm your life. I didn't think that either. The first months of our relationship were calm. There were no big arguments. There were small warning signs, but I didn't take them seriously. When he raised his voice, I told myself he was tired. When he canceled plans, I said he was stressed. When he said something hurtful, I thought, he didn't really mean it that way. I tried to understand him more than I understood myself. After almost 3 years together, something started to make me uncomfortable. He would interrupt me when I was speaking. He always made the decisions. When I didn't like something, he would say, "You're too sensitive." These didn't seem like big issues, but each one left a small weight inside me. Still, I kept telling myself, every relationship takes effort. No one is perfect. Just be a little more patient. I thought I loved him. Maybe I really did. But the peace that usually comes with love slowly disappeared. I laughed less. I thought more. I felt less like myself. I didn't want to notice this because noticing meant making a decision. Sometimes Jake was very good. Attentive, calm, someone who made promises. In those moments I felt relieved. I told myself, see, he's changing. Those small good moments were enough for me to ignore the bad ones. I was very good at convincing myself. But there was a voice inside me. Very quiet. It said, "This isn't normal." I chose not to listen to that voice for a long time. If this story already feels familiar to you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments where you're watching from. Thank you for being here. This story didn't break right away. It cracked slowly. And so did I. The first time I truly realized I was uncomfortable was on a very ordinary day. There was no big fight. No yelling. There was just the look on Jake's face when he looked at me. As if what I was saying didn't matter. As if I was an unnecessary detail. That day, I decided to tell him how I felt. Quietly. Calmly. Without blaming him. I said, "Sometimes I feel small." I said, "I feel like you don't really listen to me." I chose my words carefully. I tried not to hurt him. Because I believed that if there was a problem, it should be solved. Jake stayed silent at first. Then he took a deep breath. He looked at me and said, "You don't need to make this such a big deal." Then he added, "This is just how I am. Don't take everything personally." In that moment, something shifted inside me. It felt like the problem wasn't his behavior but my sensitivity. As if wanting to talk, to feel, to be uncomfortable was too much. Still, I didn't push the conversation further. I said, "You might be right." When I said those words, I felt a tightness in my chest, but I pushed it down. In the days that followed, Jake was more careful. He sent messages. His tone was softer. He made plans. This change gave me hope. I thought, so he understands when we talk. I felt a small sense of relief. I wanted to feel safe. I needed that. But it didn't last. A week later, he was the same again. He interrupted me again. He dismissed my opinions again. One evening, when I shared my thoughts about something related to his friends, he laughed and said, "You don't really understand these things." He said it like a joke, but the feeling it left in me was very clear. That night, when I got home, I looked at myself in the mirror. My face looked tired. My eyes felt distant. I asked myself, how long have I been feeling like this? The answer didn't come right away. Because this feeling hadn't started suddenly. It had settled in slowly. I talked to Jake again. I tried to be more direct. I said, "The way you act hurts me." I said, "I want you to be more respectful." This time he acted like he was listening. He nodded. He apologized. He said, "I'll change." In that moment I wanted to believe him. Because believing was easier than giving up. But every time it was the same cycle. A conversation. A short period of improvement. Then everything went back to how it was. And with each round I felt more tired. Tired of explaining myself. Tired of talking. Tired of being patient. The hardest part was this. Jake didn't see it as a problem. I was always the problem. At night, before falling asleep, I replayed our conversations in my head. I repeated sentences trying to understand where I had said something wrong. But what was wrong wasn't my words, or the fact that I spoke when I should have stayed quiet. What was wrong was that I was still tolerating something that hurt me. Accepting that took time. After a while, it wasn't just the arguments that felt heavy. It was how they made me feel. When Jake said something, I didn't just feel hurt anymore. I started doubting myself. I thought, maybe I really am exaggerating. As this thought settled into my mind, my confidence slowly began to fade. I used to trust my decisions. I knew what I wanted. Now, I hesitated even with simple things. What to wear? Who to see? Whether I should share my opinion. All of it turned into small calculations in my head. I tried to predict Jake's reactions. I softened my words so he wouldn't get uncomfortable. One evening, when I came home late from work, I said I wanted to rest. He asked why I hadn't told him earlier. His voice was calm, but there was blame inside it. I found myself explaining. I talked about traffic, work, not being able to check my phone. As the conversation went on, I felt a sense of shame, as if I had done something without permission. That night, lying in bed, I thought about why that conversation had exhausted me so much. The answer was clear, but I didn't want to accept it. Because the problem wasn't just that moment. This had been going on for a long time. I was constantly explaining myself, while he rarely questioned himself. Jake's behavior was often very subtle. He didn't openly yell. He didn't clearly insult me. But he implied things. He reminded me of my place with small sentences. You misunderstood that. I didn't say it like that. You're too emotional. Over time, these sentences started to replace reality. One day, while having coffee with a close friend, I talked about my relationship. I didn't give many details. I just said I was tired. She looked at me and said, Maya, you don't talk like you used to. Something inside me stopped in that moment. Someone seeing me from the outside had noticed it. On my way home, I walked. The rain was light. The streets of Seattle were gray, as always. I asked myself, when did I become this quiet? That question scared me, because I knew the answer but I couldn't say it out loud. When I tried to imagine a future with Jake, I felt an emptiness inside me. There were happy moments, but there was no peace. And I was starting to understand that this wasn't temporary. It was a habit, a pattern. And that pattern was slowly draining me. For the first time, this thought came to my mind. Maybe this relationship won't get better. That thought didn't bring me relief. It made everything feel heavier. Because living with something that won't change, or letting it go, is exhausting. And I was right in the middle of that exhaustion. Some mornings I didn't want to wake up anymore. I didn't immediately connect this feeling to the relationship. I found other explanations. Work stress, lack of sleep, the season. But there was a weight inside me, and wherever I went, it came with me. Even when I was in the same house as Jake, I felt alone. We sat next to each other, but there was an invisible distance between us. Our conversations were shallow. When I wanted to go deeper, he changed the subject. When I talked about my feelings, he either stayed silent or turned everything into logic. As if feeling was an unnecessary detail. One evening, we were going to go out together. While getting ready, I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked nice, but I didn't feel excited. When Jake saw me, he glanced at me and said, "Is that what you're wearing?" His tone was calm, but the sentence felt heavy. I changed my clothes. In that moment, I didn't question why I did it. I just wanted to avoid a problem. Outside, everything felt normal. The tables were full. People were laughing. I sat quietly at the table. While Jake was talking with his friends, I tried to join the conversation. I said one sentence. He kept talking without looking at me. In that moment, something broke inside me. Maybe it was small, but it had been building up for a long time. When we got home, I said something about it. "You ignored me," I said. He looked at me and shrugged. "You're exaggerating," he said. That word felt very familiar now. I was exaggerating. Always me. That night I couldn't sleep for a long time. I stared at the ceiling. One question kept repeating inside me. Why am I still here? My answers were mixed. Love, habit, hope. But one was stronger than the other's: fear. I was afraid of making the wrong decision. I was afraid of being alone. I was afraid of admitting that I had wasted years. The next day, Jake acted like nothing had happened. He made coffee. He asked how my day was. This sudden return to normal made me even more tired. Because nothing was erased. It was just covered up. And every time I carried what stayed underneath. At some point I realized this. I wasn't arguing anymore. I wasn't protecting myself. I was just enduring. Enduring is not love. But I was realizing that very late. For the first time, I clearly saw how much I had bent myself to stay in this relationship. How much I had stayed quiet. How much of myself I had given up. And in that moment, a quiet but firm thought appeared inside me. This can't go on like this. That thought scared me, but at the same time it allowed me to breathe a little for the first time. I couldn't silence that thought inside me. This can't go on like this stayed in my mind for days. At work. While walking. At night lying in bed. The more I tried to run from it, the clearer it became. Still, I didn't make a decision right away. I wanted to give one last chance. Or more accurately, I wanted to give him one last chance. When I decided to talk to Jake, I felt very calm. I didn't want to yell. I didn't want to accuse him. I just wanted to explain that I didn't want to feel this way anymore. One evening, when the house was quiet, I sat across from him. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. I think we really need to sit down and talk, I said. He looked at me. He tensed slightly but didn't say anything. I started speaking. I told him how I felt. I told him how lonely, unimportant, and tired I felt. My sentences were clear. For the first time I was this open. At first Jake acted like he was listening. Then his expression changed. He became defensive. I haven't treated you badly, he said. You're always the one creating problems. Then he said the sentence that hurt me the most. If you're this unhappy, then the problem isn't me. In that moment a door closed inside me. Because for the first time I saw it clearly. This conversation would not be different from the others. I would explain myself again. He would not understand again. There would be a temporary improvement again. And I would lose a little more of myself again. I stayed silent. Jake kept talking. He tried to justify himself. I wasn't really hearing his words anymore. There was a very calm emptiness inside me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was just done. I don't want to live like this, I finally said. My voice was low but clear. Jake looked at me in surprise. He didn't expect that sentence. Because I was always the one who stayed. The one who understood. This was the first time I was setting a boundary. So what do you want? He asked. There was impatience in his voice. I looked at him and said what was inside me without filtering it. This relationship isn't good for me. No matter how much we talk, it doesn't change. Jake laughed. A short mocking laugh. You're really exaggerating this, he said. In that moment I was sure. There was no need to explain anything else. Because I couldn't make myself understood to someone who didn't want to hear me. That night we slept in separate rooms. For the first time in a long while I slept deeply. When I woke up in the morning there was no heaviness inside me. Instead there was a deep sadness. But that sadness felt lighter than the exhaustion I had carried for years. I was standing on the edge of a decision. And this time I knew I wouldn't turn back. Making the decision was quieter than I expected. There was no storm inside me. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just felt very clear. I could no longer carry this relationship. And realizing that you can't carry something anymore is the first step to letting it go. The next day Jake acted like everything was normal. As if our conversation had never happened. He grabbed his coffee, looked at his phone, gave short answers. This behavior wasn't new to me. Ignoring problems had always been the easiest way for him. But this time I wasn't going to ignore it. When he came home that evening, I was waiting for him in the kitchen. I asked him to sit down. He looked at me slightly annoyed. Are we talking again? He said. That sentence showed me once more that I was in the right place. Yes, I said. But this time it's different. I told him I was ending the relationship. My sentence was long, but it wasn't complicated. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse him. I just said that I would no longer stay in this relationship. My eyes didn't fill with tears. My voice didn't shake. The decision inside me had already settled. At first Jake didn't say anything. Then he laughed. I knew that laugh. It was dismissive and belittling. We'll talk again in a few days, he said. As if this was just a mood. As if it would pass again. No, I said. This time there's nothing to talk about. That word stopped him. For the first time he was losing control. His face hardened. Are you throwing away all these years of effort? He asked. That sentence would have stopped me before. But now I felt different. Because within that effort I had lost myself the most. I've already been here for a long time, but I felt like I wasn't, I said. Now I'm just accepting it. Jake's attitude didn't change. He didn't apologize. He didn't try to understand. He didn't take responsibility. I wasn't expecting him to. His reaction only made my decision feel even more right. That night I started packing my things. It wasn't a big move. I only took what belonged to me. A small suitcase. Few clothes. My books. I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself. I was tired, but for the first time I felt light. When I closed the door behind me, something inside me broke away, but it wasn't pain. It felt more like a bond being untied. Jake didn't come after me. He didn't call out. That told me enough. When I got into the car, my hands were on the steering wheel. I didn't move for a long time. Then I took a deep breath. There was a strange relief in my chest. A freedom mixed with sadness. It wasn't easy, but it was right. In that moment I knew this. This wasn't an escape. This was me returning to myself. The first days after the breakup were quiet. I tried not to look at my phone. I wanted to be prepared if a message came, but deep down I hoped it wouldn't. Because I knew that if it did, my mind would get confused. Habits built over years don't go silent easily. On the third day Jake called. When I saw his name on the screen, my heart started beating faster. But I didn't answer. A while later he sent a message. It was short. We need to talk. I couldn't even remember how many times I had read that sentence before. The next day he texted again. This time it was longer. He said he had been misunderstood. He talked about being stressed, about how everything had been piling up lately. We can get through this, he said. While reading the message, I felt two different things inside me. One was exhaustion. The other was a familiar attachment. I agreed to meet. Not because I really wanted to, but because I didn't want to leave things unfinished. There was still a small voice inside me saying, what if this time it's really different? That voice was fed by years of effort. We met at a cafe. When Jake saw me, he stood up. He was softer. His tone was calm. He looked into my eyes. He had a way of trying to make me feel better. I don't want to lose you, he said. That sentence used to affect me deeply. Now I just listened. He talked. He talked for a long time. He said he wanted to change. He said he would be more careful, that he wouldn't hurt me. Sometimes he apologized, but he didn't really know what the apology was for. He seemed more upset about the outcome than about his behavior. I spoke less. I didn't feel a strong desire inside me. I didn't try to convince him. I didn't defend myself. I just listened. Because now I was paying attention to feelings more than words. And there was no excitement inside me. Maybe there was a little hope, but it was very weak. When he said, let's try again, I hesitated. My answer didn't come right away. Years passed in front of my eyes. The effort I had given, the moments I stayed silent, the changes I waited for. This relationship hadn't been entered easily. And it couldn't be left easily either. I don't know, I said. I'm not ready for that right now. That answer surprised him. Because before I was always ready. I was always the one to take one more step. In that moment, for the first time, I felt that he was rushing and I was holding back. The roles had changed. We stayed in touch for a while. We texted. We had short meetings. Jake seemed like he was trying. But I stayed distant. My heart wasn't opening like before. Because there was a truth inside me. I was no longer holding on to this relationship. I was standing by, protecting myself. And that difference was clearer than anything else. In the first days, Jake really was different. His messages were more thoughtful. He told me what time he would arrive. He asked questions. When he said, how are you today? He seemed like he truly cared about the answer. This version of him wasn't unfamiliar, but it still gave me a small sense of relief. Even when someone has been very tired in the past, they can still hold on to even a small change. When we spent time together, he was calmer. He didn't interrupt me. His reactions were controlled. I thought, maybe he really noticed. That thought didn't excite me, but it softened me. I didn't completely close myself off. After so many years, expecting everything to disappear at once didn't feel realistic. Each time there was a short improvement. Then everything returned to the same place. One evening we had made plans. We had talked hours earlier. I was ready, prepared to leave the house. Jake was late. I texted him, no reply. Called, no answer. An hour later he texted, "I'm sitting with friends." It ran a bit long. I felt a tightness inside me, because I had lived this situation many times before. When I brought it up, his tone changed immediately. "Don't exaggerate," he said. "There's no need to make such a big deal out of 1 hour." The same word again. My feelings were being minimized again. "Being late isn't the problem," I said. "Not letting me know is what bothers me." His answer was clear. "It would be better if you didn't focus on everything so much." Something happened in that moment. It was like the fog inside me cleared a little, because that sentence felt very familiar. What I thought was change was only a short pause. In the days that followed, small but familiar behavior started to return. Looking at his phone while I was talking, cutting my opinion short and pushing his own, explaining my discomfort by connecting it to my past or my personality, saying, "You're just very sensitive about these things." One day I told him clearly, "This is taking me back to the same place," I said. He paused for a moment. Then he took a deep breath. "Look, I'm trying to change, but you keep reminding me," he said. That sentence didn't surprise me, but it hurt. Because once again the responsibility was placed on me. That careful version of him at the beginning slowly turned into impatience. When I noticed this, I felt tired inside. This tiredness wasn't new. It was very old. It had just been covered for a while. One evening he said to me, "You're not like you used to be." He was right. I wasn't. I talked less. I explained less. Because now I carried a knowing inside me. No matter what happened, I knew this cycle didn't change. Jake's toxic behaviors had returned. Maybe they had never left. I was just seeing them more clearly now. And that clarity didn't scare me. It calmed me. Because the issue was no longer what he was doing but what I was willing to accept. And very quietly inside me, I felt that I was no longer accepting the same things. This time I didn't argue with Jake. I didn't try to correct him. I didn't point out his behavior. I just watched. For the first time in a long while, I chose not to react. Because some things become clear only when you step back. I noticed the moments when he was good. Usually when he wanted something. When he expected me to stay close, follow plans, stay quiet. In those moments he was kind. His tone was soft. But when I was myself, when I set a boundary or spoke about my discomfort, his patience disappeared quickly. One evening I shared my opinion about something. It wasn't a big issue. Just a normal everyday comment. Jake frowned and said, "It's strange that you think that way." In the past, that sentence would have silenced me. This time I stayed quiet, but something else happened inside me. I didn't feel the need to defend myself. Because I now knew what was normal. As I watched him, I saw a pattern. First closeness. Then control. Then belittling. And finally blaming everything on my sensitivity. That pattern never changed. It only took short breaks. And I had mistaken those breaks for hope. One day I said this to myself. If someone loves you, they try to understand you. If someone loves you, they don't make you explain yourself just to exist. This thought settled into a calm place inside me. It was a truth independent of what Jake said. While watching him, I no longer asked, "Does he love me?" I asked, "Am I myself here?" Most of the time the answer was no. Sometimes I noticed he didn't look into my eyes while I was talking. Sometimes he pressured me not by raising his voice, but by making his sentences harder. Sometimes he praised me in a way that was actually directing me. These were small details. But small details carry big truths. As a viewer, I want to say this. If you are constantly measuring yourself in a relationship, weighing your words, shrinking your feelings, then the problem is not communication. This awareness didn't make me sad. It calmed me, because I no longer had expectations. I wasn't waiting for Jake to change. I was seeing him as he was. And seeing him clearly was setting me free. His behavior continued. But something in me had changed. When I didn't react, it lost its old power. He felt that too. His impatience grew. He became uncomfortable where he couldn't control. And for the first time I understood this. Some people don't change. But when you choose to observe them, you do. This part of my journey was quiet. But it taught me a lot. Because now I knew what to look at. And looking was stronger than hoping. As I watched Jake, the decision inside me grew slowly without rushing. I wasn't acting on sudden emotions anymore. There was no anger, and no hope mixed with expectation. There was only clarity. And that clarity gave me a calm I hadn't felt in a long time. His behavior became more visible. Because I was no longer lost inside it. One day when he was in a good mood, he said, "You've really matured." He said it like a compliment, but I felt what was underneath. He liked that I asked fewer questions and pushed back less. In that moment I realized something. The quieter I became, the more comfortable he felt. One evening he was late again. This time I didn't explain. I didn't ask. I just said, "Okay." He looked at my face and noticed something was missing. He was expecting an argument. He was expecting me to get hurt and then forgive him. But that cycle didn't happen. And that made him uneasy. "Is there a problem?" he asked. "No," I said. And it was true. Because I was no longer fighting the problem. I was accepting it. A distance had formed inside me. Not a cold distance. More like a protective space. His words couldn't enter that space. Before, one sentence from him could change my whole day. Now I listened like I was taking notes. This change was impossible not to notice. Sometimes Jake returned to his old methods. He hinted. He made small jokes. He tested my boundaries. When there was no reaction, his tone became harder. I stayed calm again. Because now I knew this reaction was the fuel of this pattern. As long as I didn't give fuel, the fire didn't grow. It faded. During this time, I started turning back to myself. I went on walks. I remembered things I had been postponing for a long time. I listened to the music I loved. These weren't big steps. But they were bringing me back to myself. Who I was, what I loved, how I wanted to feel. I often asked myself this. If I stay in this relationship, who will I be in 5 years? The answer wasn't comforting. Quieter. Less me. Then I asked another question. What happens if I leave? That question was scary, but it carried possibility. The possibility of making mistakes. Of being alone. But also the possibility of breathing again. Jake's fear of losing me started to make him more possessive. He asked where I was more often. He wanted to know who I was seeing. I used to think this was care. Now I could clearly see it was control. That's when my decision completed itself inside me. Quietly. Without arguments. Without drama. This relationship was no longer my path. And knowing that didn't make me sad, it made me lighter. Because the fight I had been fighting just to stay was over. Now there was one last step left to take. A step for myself. When my decision became clear, I didn't leave right away. I gave myself a few days. Those days turned out to be more instructive than I expected. Because when you decide to let something go, you see it in its most bare form. And for the first time, I was seeing Jake without filters. I stopped adjusting my plans around him. I made my own schedule. Sometimes I replied late. Sometimes I said, "I want to be alone today." There was no guilt inside me when I said these things. And that disturbed Jake. "You weren't like this before," he said one day. He was right. I used to be less myself. His patience grew thinner in response to this change. At first, he tried to keep up the role of being understanding. Then came small complaints. Then sentences filled with implication. "I'm trying for you, but you're pulling away." That sentence had stopped me for years. This time it didn't. Because I knew one thing clearly now. Effort is not silencing the other person. One evening while talking, he once again turned the subject to my behavior. "You created this distance," he said. I looked at him and for the first time I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain. I simply said, "I want to be close to myself now." That answer didn't satisfy him. Because it came from a place he couldn't control. That day I realized Jake didn't want me, he wanted my old version. The more understanding one. The quieter one. The one who tolerated more. As I changed, his discomfort grew. And that discomfort showed me again and again how right my decision was. In the last days, arguments became shorter. Because I didn't extend them. When he said something, it no longer echoed inside me. The sentences I used to think about for hours no longer stayed with me. This wasn't a wall. It was a boundary. I started packing my things. Slowly, quietly, without anyone noticing. Each item was a goodbye but also a return. A return to myself. To my life. To my silence. Jake could feel that something was ending. Sometimes he became harsh. Sometimes overly attentive. These ups and downs no longer shook me, because I had made my decision not based on his behavior, but on my own truth. Before leaving, I understood one thing very clearly. Leaving a relationship isn't always dramatic. Sometimes the quietest moment is the strongest one. And I had grown strong quietly. I spent days thinking about how the final conversation would go. Where we would be, what sentences I would say, how he would react. But the truth was this. Life doesn't follow the scenes we rehearse in our heads. Some conversations aren't planned or dramatic. They simply happen. And when they're over, what remains is a deep silence. When Jake and I sat down, the atmosphere was calm. Not a peaceful calm, but the kind that comes when both people feel something has reached its end. He looked at me and said, "It's obvious you've been pulling away for a while." His tone was soft, but underneath it was still a question. As if he wanted to believe this might be temporary. For the first time, I didn't give a long explanation. I didn't defend myself. I didn't go through the past one by one. I just said this. I can't be myself in this relationship. And that's reason enough for me. That sentence was simple, but it summarized everything I had been carrying inside. Jake stayed silent at first. Then that familiar expression appeared on his face. He tried to steer the conversation elsewhere. He asked for time again. He said once more, "We can get through this together." I had heard these sentences many times before, but this time they meant nothing inside me, because I knew now that there was nothing solid behind those words. "I've made my decision," I said. "This isn't a moment of anger. It's something I've been thinking about for a long time." My voice was calm. There was no trembling. That's when I understood it was truly over. Because when something really ends, you don't end it by shouting. You end it with clarity. Jake's demeanor shifted. He looked hurt, then angry, then calm again. As I watched these transitions, I felt sadness but no regret. I didn't want to hurt him, but I also didn't want to keep hurting myself. And sometimes those two things can't exist at the same time. The conversation didn't last long. Didn't need to. What needed to be said had already been said. When I stood up, he didn't follow me. He didn't say, "Think about it one last time." Maybe he understood then that some things don't come back. When I got home, everything was quiet. First, that silence felt strange. For the first time in a long while, I didn't have to explain myself to anyone. My phone was quiet. My mind was too. I sat down and did nothing. I just sat. And that felt better than I expected. In the days that followed, I felt an emptiness. It wasn't frightening. It was unfamiliar. A space I had spent years trying to fill now belonged to me. I didn't know what to do with it yet, but I knew very clearly what I no longer wanted. I told myself this. You don't have to be happy immediately after a relationship ends. You don't have to be strong right away either. You just have to be honest. This chapter was a closure for me. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. And within that quiet, I heard my own voice clearly for the first time. The silence wasn't as empty as I had imagined. The silence that remained after Jake was actually a fullness I hadn't felt in a long time. The first days were strange. Habits were still with me. Reaching for my phone, wanting to share something. The reflex to tell someone how my day went. But none of these were obligations anymore. Realizing that slowly brought me relief. I started spending more time with myself. Walking calmly under streetlights was something I had forgotten. My favorite music played in my headphones. A pace set by no one else. A version of me that didn't have to please anyone. Some evenings I felt lonely. I won't deny that. But this loneliness was very different from the one I felt while I was in the relationship. This loneliness was quiet. Honest. It belonged to me. I wasn't waiting for anyone. I wasn't trying to fix anyone. I was simply there. Over time I realized I wasn't trying to be strong. I was just listening to myself. What I felt. What I needed. What I would never accept again. These weren't grand decisions. But they were small clarities that changed my life. There were moments when I thought about Jake. Not with resentment. More like a memory. like a past that taught me something but didn't call me back. I wasn't angry with him, because some people aren't bad, they just aren't good for you. And accepting that is more liberating than forgiveness. One day, I looked in the mirror and noticed something. My face was calmer. My shoulders were more relaxed. My eyes were more open. I had changed, but not to become someone else. To return to myself. To you listening to this story, I want to say this. If you constantly feel the need to explain yourself in a relationship, if your feelings are minimized, if the sentence, "I'll just endure a little longer," sits at the center of your life, you are not alone. Leaving doesn't always bring immediate happiness. Staying isn't always love. But the moment you choose yourself, something starts to shift in the right direction. For me, happiness didn't arrive as a big explosion. It came quietly, slowly, but it was real. My life still isn't perfect. I'm still learning. I still get tired sometimes. But there's a difference now. When I'm tired, I don't blame myself. I hold myself instead. If this story touched you, if you found a piece of your own life in it, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments where you're watching from right now. You're not alone. You're here. And that matters. Thank you for listening, for walking with me through this quiet journey. We may have different lives, but our feelings are more shared than we think. And sometimes, a story finds us exactly where we need it. This was my story, but maybe just a little bit it was yours too.